We got to talk Calvin Ridley. We have to talk Calvin Ridley. Biggest story of the news yesterday, NFL receiver Ridley with the Atlanta Falcons played 5 games for him last year. Remember, took some time away, wanted to work on his mental health. So he was on the non-football injury list. And during that time in November, he bet some parlays on an app. He had a 3-teamer in there, 5-teamer, 8-teamer. He said he lost only $1,500. This was tracked because he put his own information into the app, and then the NFL works with different places to kind of just look over this stuff. And they were like, hey, this player, active player, he's betting on NFL games, and you get banned for a year. You can't do it. All right. It sounds really simple. And there are very few things, I think, in life that we should all be able to agree on, but this should be one of them. If you're an active player in your league, you can't bet on those games. You just can't. I mean, this is the reason why we talked about Pete Rose having a lifetime ban now for decades, okay? You cannot invite speculation into the legitimacy of your product if the outcomes are the product. I think that's pretty clear. But I knew it. I'm like, okay, let's see who's got what. Let's see them all. Let's see who has the worst takes on Ridley being suspended a year. My Florio Emmanuel Acho parlay smashed. I was like, oh, here we go. All right. Florio was arguing with Albert Breer. And essentially, Florio had said, look, the league is earning millions through the peddling a consumer product that it won't let players consume. It's a tad effed up. No, it isn't. And by the way, the league made, according to Florio last year, $270 million in revenue from gambling partnerships. Okay. It's everywhere. We're part of it. I'm probably going to throw this open to an ad about placing your own same-game parlay. If you're an NFL player who's active, don't bet on games in your league. But you don't have to worry about that right now because you're not in season. And by the way, Florio himself pointed out, it's great for football, but it comes with an inherent warning for the current stewards of the game. If some of that revenue isn't devoted to ensuring the accuracy of calls, protecting inside information, preventing corruption of coaches, players, and officials, and otherwise safeguarding the integrity of the game, the league will be stepping into a bear trap eventually. So Florio himself last year was warning that, hey, you can't invite in this gray area. And then you have a player who bets, who does the thing that you wanted protection against. You're saying it wasn't that bad. But the worst one was probably Emmanuel Acho, who posted a video. And look, he just wanted the retweets, but it was a video of Ridley cutting off some routes a little short of the sticks. I don't think it's entirely fair. Maybe there's something there. Maybe the story gets bigger, but I don't know that it's entirely fair to post the video and then speculate as if there's this, well, who knows? He was short of the sticks there. Why did he cut off that breakaway route against Kansas City? What happened there? I'll admit, even if it looks a little weird, it's a little weird, but I also think it's entirely unfair to do to Ridley. But hey, again, people have made a career after just retweeting other people's fucking videos, so I'm not entirely surprised that it happened. And then that turned into a whole thing, and then he deleted the tweet. All right. So here's another part of it that's worth mentioning. If the league is making $270 million this past year on gambling partnerships, guess who also makes out on that money? The players. So even though people kind of love to find hypocrisy in things, I really do. I think our society, I don't know if this is in other countries too, but it always kind of makes you feel, it gets back to my college football rant that I always go to, where if you already expect to get fucked over because you get fucked over in so many different things in life, that you're like, oh, hey, well, that you're a hypocrite. Like, that's hypocritical. That shouldn't happen. I actually don't think this is hypocrisy. I don't think it's hypocrisy for the league to have gambling partnerships and say, hey, by the way, the reason our league is so successful is because people think it's legitimate and they're entertained, and we have these outcomes that people don't expect because it's sports and it's life and any given Sunday and all of that stuff. And then if people found out that it was fixed, or if certain players were fixing games for their own personal benefit, or were fixing games to get out of trouble because they were gambling with somebody that they shouldn't have been gambling with, then yeah, that would be a problem for a business that's hoping to one day generate $20 billion in revenue. I also think that the Miami Dolphins part of this is relevant, but I'm not sure it's the same thing, because as soon as Calvin Ridley, which again is one of my biggest premises, we have someone who is very obvious to blame, and in this case, it's Calvin Ridley. He is the person that fucked up. It is a very nasty punishment. You're going to lose like $11 million in salary by being dismissed for the entire year. He can appeal this within days. He can ask for reinstatement in February of 2023. Okay, so just to clear that part of it up. But we have the person to blame in Ridley. But then it's like, yeah, but who else can we blame? Can we blame a bunch of other people? Can we blame the NFL because of these partnerships? Can we blame someone else? Can we blame society? Can we blame Stephen Ross, the Miami Dolphins, who supposedly, according to Brian Flores' lawsuit, offered up Flores hundreds of thousands of dollars in bonuses to lose games on purpose to increase their draft odds, right? To help them get a better draft pick. I'd say that we probably taught process tanking differently because we're a little bit more used to it. Sam Hinkie throwing games away doesn't feel the same as an NFL player betting on games in a league that he's an active member of. Maybe that's just the way we process things that are different. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of where we're all at, that we do process these things a little differently. So to get that one out of the way, I want to then pivot to this, the analogy. I like analogies. Sometimes I'm great with them. Other times I get done with them and go, that was a bit of a reach. That wasn't the best one you ever had. I tried to come up with a perfect analogy for this. What's the perfect analogy for somebody at the workplace where you know definitively there's no argument about it? You just can't do this. The ones that I came up with are subjects that I don't want to debate if they're better or worse than gambling on a football game. I'm not sure that I want to get into that of what we know we can or can't do at the workplace. But in this case, for every athlete's been a part of if you're an NHL player, if you're an NBA player, if you're a baseball player, if you're a football player, on and on and on. And I'm sure European soccer is the same, despite all the weird shit that seems to happen over there. It is understood. Hey, the biggest thing that you can't do, not saying it's the most important thing in the world, but for our world, you can't bet on some of these games. And the point is, I couldn't come up with a perfect analogy because this one is so obvious. This one is so obvious. You could say, oh, like insider trading. Yeah, but I don't know. It's not cool, but some people figure out a way to do it. Real estate. Well, what if you do this? Or what if your mortgage, you do, there's all sorts of stuff that you hear about that can sort of happen. And yet none of them feel as definitive of being somebody betting on games in a league that you're an active member of. So then it kind of got me thinking about like Nat Geo. All right. Now you're going to think, wait, okay, how are we pivoting to Nat Geo? Stay with me here. You ever watch Locked Up Abroad? The story's almost always the same. It's like three guys from, I don't know, San Diego, Brett, Chad, whatever. And they're like, yeah, we were in Thailand for the summer, man. It just didn't, the trip was unbelievable. Met a bunch of locals who were camping out on the beach, just living the life. Funds were running a little low. And, we met these really cool guys from Switzerland. And they were like, if you can run some tar heroin into Cambodia, make some money off of it. And like, we weren't hurting anybody. So next thing you know, we're duct taping kilos of heroin to our abdomen. We get in a plane and then we land and we get busted, man. You're like, okay. And then you see the guy present day and he looks like Sam Elliott and he's only like 41. And he's like, yeah, the prisons over there, not a great time. And you're at home with your wife or your girlfriend, maybe you're alone. And you watch the show and you go, well, why would you do that? Like maybe you get away with it, but if you get caught, you are fucked. All right? And that's kind of what I felt like today. And I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do one more because this one is actually perhaps the most telling, even though it's going to sound maybe the most screwed up. Because what else happens whenever anybody gets into trouble with the NFL? We go back to the Ray Rice 2-game suspension by Roger Goodell. Ray Rice was punished in July of 2014. Goodell's a bad public speaker. So on top of that, and then us seeing the video and how poorly the NFL handled actually getting the video on their own, they got crushed for it, deservedly so. But at the time, even though nobody likes this, I don't think Goodell, I don't think the NFL, they were aware of what the reaction was going to be because there have been other people that have been suspended for domestic violence, but it was different because it felt like the world kind of changed because they saw the video that day. So the NFL is like, all right, the CBA says we can do this, and this is what we did. And then it became weed suspensions versus Ray Rice suspensions for about, 7 years because of that one always jumps in. It's like, well, look at Calvin Ridley, but then look at weed. Like, all right. But then when Adrian Peterson got in trouble for hitting a boy, his son, on the genitals with a stick, which when you read those text messages, it was pretty, it sucked, man. I mean, look, it goes without saying. It was awful to read and all that stuff. And then Goodell's like, okay, so wait a minute. I got crushed for the Ray Rice part of the suspension, but now I can just say, all right, I'm going to go commissioner's exemption list, and Adrian Peterson, you're out for the rest of the season. And that was November of 2014. So the November 2014 suspension happened because of the reaction to the lack of suspension for Ray Rice back to July of 2014. And by the way, the real punishment for Ray Rice, he never played football again. So 2 games, not enough games, full season, whatever. The NFL doesn't get any credit for anything, and I understand why, those criticisms. And I'm not saying that 2 games was necessarily right. But what I'm saying is that you ended up getting the punishment with Ray Rice. So every one of you that tweet about Ray Rice only getting 2 games, the NFL gave you the punishment that you actually wanted because professionally he was done at 26 years old. The reason I bring this all up, and it's as fucked up as this is going to sound, is that we have now had, I don't know how many examples of people breaking the law, doing terrible things at home, and in this case with Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, domestic violence and child abuse. And I don't think it's ever really hurt the product. Has it? Do you watch less football now? The ratings, after a little dip, they went back up, didn't they? Projected revenues, new TV deal, all the stuff, the money keeps pouring in because the consumer has shown that you may not like it and it may bother you, but it's not going to bother you enough to change the channel. But if you were to learn, as much as everybody loves a conspiracy theory, if you were to learn that that the outcomes were being impacted because guys were actually betting on the games that they were in or getting inside information from a friend from a college that's on another team, if you started to hear about any gray area where you felt like the outcomes were less legitimate, that is what the NFL is protecting itself against, because that might be the thing that could impact their business, because unfortunately, none of the other stuff has.